need to take roll again? Nope, we get to skip that. All right. So first up, we have a request for approval of the minutes of the work session and evening meeting of May 18th.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes of the work session and regular evening meeting on May 18th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
Agent,
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thanks. And now with the consent agenda, all items with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered in its normal sequence.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
And now we will move on to the ordinances. Nothing's on first reading, so we'll go ahead and move to second reading.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the second reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the third reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD 21-21, an ordinance repealing Boise City Code Title II, Chapter 10, and enacting a new Title II, Chapter 10 Boise City Code entitled Office of Police Accountability, providing a title establishing the Office of Police Accountability, providing a mission statement and goals, setting forth appointment of director, scope of authority, independence of the Office of Police Accountability, access to information and records and cooperation, specifying duties and responsibilities of the Office of Police Accountability, outlining transparency and reporting requirements, confidentiality of records and information requirements, and false report procedures, and providing an effective date.
Thanks, Jamie. Next up, we have one ordinance on third reading.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that further reading of ordinance 2621 be dispensed with and the record reflect that it has been read for the third time in full.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries. ORD 26-21, an ordinance CAR 21-00001 for property located at 121 South Spring Tree Lane, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance, from R-2D medium density residential with design review overlay to R-3D multifamily residential with design review overlay, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of ORD 2621.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And next, we have one ordinance on first, second, and third reading.
thank you, Madam Mayor. Just explanation to the public. This is a trailer ordinance to the changes to our animal code that Councilmember Thompson brought forward, and we're hurrying it up so that it meets the same timeline. And with that, I would move that all rules of the City Council interfering with the immediate consideration of ORD 2721 be suspended, that the portions of the Idaho Code 5902 requiring an ordinance to be read on 3 different days, twice by title and once in full, be dispensed with, and that the records show that it has been read for the third time in full.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Excuse me. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Agent.
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes,
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries. ORD 27-21, an ordinance amending Boise City Code Section 5-1-25 to update and clarify the penalties for animal code violations, adopting specific infraction and misdemeanor penalties for animal code violations, adding all animal code specific infraction and misdemeanor penalties to the city's fines and fees schedule, providing for a waiver of the reading rules, approving a summary of the ordinance, and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor, I
Yes.
move that ORD 2721 be approved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Thompson,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg,
Yes.
Halliburton,
Yes.
Sanchez,
Yes.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And next up, do we have an executive session? We do not have an executive session. So with that, we will move back to our work session budgeting presentations with Deputy Chief in a moment. What?
Takes a
We'll
minute.
take a 10-minute break. Oh, this is when you told me that. That's right. We're supposed to take a 10-minute break to move platforms around. So we'll take a break and then Chief Weiniger will join us for the presentation. Welcome back, everybody. We are going to move right into the presentations again. And up first is Deputy Chief Ron Winiger for the police. And I've got to say that it's somewhat fitting that Ron's actually acting chief right now. Chief Lee's son graduates from the Air Force Academy today. And it was this time a year ago that you were interim chief.
It was.
And so this is your swan song as you head off, because it's the end of this month that you'll be saying goodbye and moving on to better things in retirement.
In about 3 weeks from now, yes. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we really appreciate your service and think this is a great way to see you one last time.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I appreciate being here today. And it is with somewhat mixed feelings because I recognize this is probably the last time I'll ever be before you, at least as an employee. Who knows, I could come back other ways, but it's an honor to be here. And I've been asked a few times recently, how could I care about things like budget when I have 3 weeks to retire? But I will say you don't spend the better part of 3 decades working for the city of Boise without coming to love the city of Boise and care deeply about all things considered, including the budgets, because it sets the stage for us to be able to do the jobs that we do in public safety, to be able to keep the members of our community safe so that they can enjoy all of the other things that we've heard from department directors and department heads today. So thank you. I will try to be relatively brief if I can. I want to go over some of just the recent investments that we have made and some of the things we've accomplished in the last year, and then talk about some of the requests that we have for this coming fiscal year. The first thing I would mention is that we are on the precipice of a situation where I would term it a generational retirement. We have a whole lot of folks eligible to retire in the very near future, and we're kind of already experiencing that. I have members of the command staff with me here today, and it's the hope that they get familiar with this process, because most of them were not sitting in the chair as a captain of the Boise Police Department just a few months ago. We have one, Captain Jones, that's been a captain for a couple of years now, but everybody needs to be familiar with this process. So I appreciate them being here today. And if you have questions, I'm turning it over to them. But one of the things we've recently done is create the Division of Training, Education, and Development. And Captain Fomby has been hired to lead that division. And it's important because we are in the process of hiring and onboarding numerous folks from all areas of the country, as well as Boise. We have just started our second police academy this year. Last Monday, in fact, it started. And we had hoped to have 15 or 16 officers, lateral officers from other places in that academy. As it turns out, we only had 9 start with us. So we are facing recruiting challenges as well as training challenges. But this division is going to be built out so that we can onboard the right people and provide them with the training they need to do the job, as well as to provide in-service training for our officers that are ongoing members of the department. The behavioral health response team is one of those that you're very familiar with, where we pair a clinician with an officer and address those folks who are large consumers of police services because of their dealing with tough challenges in the way of mental health and mental illness challenges. So that team has recently been authorized to be doubled. We had just the one pair, an officer with a clinician, and we are in the process of hiring a second clinician right now so that that team can be spread out across all days of the week and have that opportunity to provide those services to our vulnerable populations. And the same with the service coordination team that is also in the process of hiring, so we can help those who are facing houselessness challenges. Our implicit bias training, we led in the city, and well over a couple of years ago, we had our first round of implicit bias training for all members of the police department. And we have just recently completed a second round of that, and an update, refresher, as well as new information for our officers and for our employees. We also have completed 100% of our officers receiving the crisis intervention team training. That's a 40-hour class dealing with all aspects of helping folks in crisis, largely with mental health challenges, but all kinds of crisis. So we're happy that we've been able to get everybody through that training recently. Talked about hiring and onboarding new officers. That is a continual challenge, but our hope is to, again, we started our second full academy just last week, and we hope to run a new academy this fall of officers without previous experience. The first two are with previous experience, lateral hires from outside. And the next one, we are hoping to bring on those folks who will be with us 20, 25, 30 years. And we need to have a mixture of officers coming in and going through that process. We recently completed a redistricting project, which was really driven by making the beat areas, if you will, that an officer works smaller so that they can have a connection to the community, and making it so we're spending less time driving across town from call to call. So we hope to see some efficiency improvements there. And it has just been a community policing effort as well as one of just good management in laying out the work areas that our officers work in. We have recently removed the mandatory rotation that was in place in an effort to try to have officers be well-rounded. They would only be able to spend a certain number of years in an assignment before they were forced to move. We feel like we can get a better expertise if we leave folks in those assignments that they are really drawn to and enjoy and want to work in, and we can provide some additional specialized training for them so that we really get the expertise that we needed in those critical positions within the department. And that can be investigations, community outreach, you name it. There are a lot of different specialties outside of the regular patrol work that you often think of as an officer doing. We have recently created some dashboards for transparency so that folks can look in their neighborhoods and find out what's going on in their neighborhood as it relates to crime reporting, statistics, and those types of things, as well as how long it takes us to respond to calls for service. We are looking at more opportunities to create dashboards so that we can be more transparent and give information to the citizens in our community and to our residents about what's happening. And so we're looking at different ways. There are some significant challenges on the information that we gather currently. So we're looking at ways to gather that information and then create more dashboards so that the citizens and residents of our communities can access them. Last couple of things on our list here. We have recently received a donation of medical equipment and are already working to train our officers in the use of that equipment. And it is a significant donation from a nonprofit group that donates to law enforcement across the country so that we can have things like, unfortunate topic, but chest seals, gunshot wound treatment, quick clot gauze, those types of things, and how to use those, because sometimes we are there first on the scene of a trauma incident. And so we can provide that needed medical care to just save a life in the few moments that it takes for the fire department, the paramedics to get there and perform some advanced life-saving measures. So we're appreciative of that donation and the training that's ongoing. And lastly, policy revision. Lexipol is a company that provides policy advice and policy, but this is an opportunity for us to look at our high liability policies, and those will be revamped first. We will use help from Lexipol to get us where we need to be as far as national best practices and make sure that we have those things, as well as a review of our Idaho case law and those different impacts to our policy. And then we will look at a revamp of the entire policy manual thereafter. But those are some of the things that are going on in the works and have been accomplished in the last year or two. Okay, moving quickly on to some of our requests for this next fiscal year. We are significantly looking at staffing shortages. I mentioned, and not to speak too much about growth because I think that was already covered adequately, we are facing some growth challenges, but right now just keeping up with the positions that we have vacant, as well as those that we hope to add to provide that critical service that we need to, is going to be a challenge. And so we are asking for additional positions, and we have information about those. I think many of you are familiar with that. We can do a deeper dive later if you have questions, but there are a number of positions that we really need to build out in order to bring on the officers that we need to fill those critical roles. We are down right now. You're all familiar with many of the challenges we've faced over the past year, but when we have a need to provide for public safety at whether it be special events or demonstrations or rallies, we have to make sure that those are safely held and met. And so we've had to redeploy officers from other assignments, investigations, community outreach assignments to be able to staff those and ensure public safety. And it's not always just a matter of cost savings to be able to do that, but it's really a matter of safety. And so With that and the increased demands on our workload, we find ourselves having to redeploy folks from their regular assignments back into that patrol function. And that has been a challenge. We're currently down, I think, about 10 officers in our community outreach division, where those folks are filling patrol responsibilities. And the patrol division is currently also at one of the lowest staffing levels that we've been in many years. So with that, we do have staffing requests. And then there are some equipment requests that we have. In order to meet national best practices, we are asking for the upgrade of some of our equipment, and that's personal protective equipment, as well as the tools that we already have and we need to replace. So I'll spend a little bit more time on two or three of the breakouts down below on that. But we also have a need to increase our criminal intelligence and information-led policing units so that we are working smarter and have the resources in place to do the analysis of where our threats are and where we need to respond and put our resources. It is no secret that Boise enjoys a relatively low crime rate, and we are in a great position in that regard. But the types of crimes, if you look closely, are changing in Boise, and we are seeing an increase in a number of different areas. One is sexual assaults, and that is one of those investigations that's very time intensive and difficult for our officers to do, and it takes more time to do those investigations properly. Another one that we are seeing is certainly fraud is up, and assaults on police officers has more than doubled in the last 10 years. And so some of these things require us to look at how we do our job and do it differently and more effectively. I'll just touch on a few of the requests for equipment. Radios, we have long been planning for a replacement of radios. This is the radio I was probably issued 20 years ago. And do any of you, Madam Mayor, or members of the council, have the same cell phone with you today that you bought 20 years ago? Probably not. Technology has improved dramatically, and this is one of the new radios that we have purchased, and we need to purchase many more of them. But if I'll let me indulge in an analogy real quick. If you had a smartphone and you had a new app that you wanted to download, you could just go to the store and actually have them download the app for you, and you could take it back and go on your merry way. And then if you needed to download another app, you could go do the same thing. This radio represents that technology. This radio has the ability to be programmed over the air and receive updates and software updates and so forth over the air, so that the radio shops don't have to actually touch every radio to keep it updated. There are also some improvements in encryption technology and several other reasons why we need to upgrade those radios. Not to mention that these are well past their service life predictions. They're a great radio, but they've served well, and we're about 10 years past the service life on many of them. I know we're running out of time. I will be quick. Taser replacements. The tasers that our officers currently carry. First of all, this is a taser, and many of you are familiar with that or have seen those. But the ones that we carry were introduced in 2003, and we have been almost 2 decades with many of those. The next iteration, the X26P, was introduced about 10 years later. And those are the ones that we currently have many of our officers carrying. Both of those are completely outdated in the realm of technology and coverage from the manufacturer as far as warranty. And in fact, their $10 million liability coverage on defective workmanship is no longer applicable to the tasers that we currently carry because they are out of date and not supported. So we are looking at replacing with the newest taser technology that's out there, and gives us the opportunity to reduce injuries to officers, as well as, and maybe even more importantly, the citizens of our community and the residents. We have done not a comprehensive workload analysis recently, but from anecdotal reports, we have officers spending more time on calls than we used to. And oftentimes those officers are clearing those calls so that they can go take other calls for service before they're really done. And so sometimes they're checking out on reports and finishing things up at the end of their shift that really should be tagged with the original call that they were on, so that we can keep better track of how long these calls for service take. And we really don't have the ability to track that right now. So we look forward to doing a comprehensive workload analysis and a staffing study to see where exactly we are short. We know we're very short in officers and the ability to meet the the requirements, but we need to find out exactly how short. But we are in the process of trying to hire as quickly as we can and train and get folks through that program so we can meet the needs that are currently on our plate. I'll be happy to answer questions or call somebody else to answer questions if need
Madam
be.
Mayor.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll take a couple questions and then also Christina's here to collect other questions we can't necessarily get to and for follow-up.
Thank you. I'll be brief, just knowing that as members of the public may be looking at the staffing request and saying what, recognizing that with the growth that we've had over the last 10, 15 years, our growth in staffing at the police department really has not kept up, just like it hasn't in other departments. This is the beginning of a down payment on that. You mentioned the workload study. I would mention that the city council has discussed and agreed that we would like to do a complete staffing study. And I think that will help us understand really what those needs are, how they can best be developed so that our residents are best served by them, and look forward to working with the police department on that.
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, thank you very much. We look forward to that as well. We know that we're many bodies short, but we look forward to a comprehensive study to find out exactly where we need to place those to be most effective in our community and where the community really would like our resources to be placed if we have the opportunity to do more community policing types of outreach. And we look forward to that. Thank you for the support.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, Ron, thank you so much for the presentation. My question is around the investment in equipment, because your guys' equipment is kind of expensive, which I was very surprised by. And I think there were a lot of people who were kind of surprised by that. So my question is, like, for example, in parks, we have a list of major repairs and maintenance, a list of things that are going to need some capital investment in upcoming years. Does the police have something similar to that? Or are you in the process of developing something like that so that we have a very predictable schedule of when we need to replace these big ticket items?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Woodings, yes, thank you for the question. We absolutely do have, and we've been working on and planning for the replacement of things like radios. I've been in those planning meetings for the past couple of years as we project out when we need to and when we can budget for these items. And yes, they are very expensive, and we do have a comprehensive list that we have been working on and are working on continually to look at those equipment needs. As it falls right now, there are just some pretty expensive big ticket items that are falling due for replacement, and upgrades in technology are requiring it. But it's kind of an ongoing process for us to keep those things on the front burner so that we know what we have to replace in the future and can plan for them.
Madam Mayor? Yeah. A very related question. Do the mobile data computers, radios, and tasers have the same expected useful life? So my question is, are we going to have to buy all three at the same time in 10 years, or do they have different expected useful lives such that this perfect storm of all of them coming up due now doesn't happen to some police chief in the future?
Great question. Thank you. And that is absolutely correct. They have different lifespans. So the tasers are about a 5-year recommended lifespan, and the radios are considerably longer than that. Again, we are using radios that are easily 20 years old. I don't know that that's what we want to get in the habit of doing, but they are really good quality. But the technology changes. I would expect that we would get a good 8 to 10 years at least out of these radios. So it will be a different replacement cycle for that. And the mobile data computers or terminals in the police cars, those are a little different depending on what you buy. You can buy ones that are a little cheaper and may last 3 years. You might buy some that are a little more expensive and could increase that out to 6 or 7, but they should not fall all at the same time in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Kelsey Stewart with Planning and Development Services.
Mayor, members of council, Kelsey Stewart, interim PDS director. It's so great to see all of your smiling faces. So thank you for that. In PDS, we have been referring to FY21 as the year of the marathon. And so we think we're on mile 18, 19, catching our stride, but we know that we have the hardest and the longest miles yet to go. So as we look at our stride for FY21, there are some milestones that I'd like to highlight for all of you. So the first one was the housing bonus ordinance was introduced. This opportunity provided incentives and allowances for density and height, parking reductions, and an administrative review process. In addition, as part of the Housing Land Trust, the second property was purchased at State and Arthur. We deployed 1.7 million in CARES funds to public service agencies, so responding to the increased needs of households experiencing homelessness, domestic violence, those with substance use disorders, child care scholarships, and households needing mortgage assistance. In addition, launched the Emergency Rental Assistance Program in partnership with the Housing Authority that served 845 households through May 17th, totaling 3.77 million in rental and utility assistance. We supported multiple construction projects.
Kelsey, sorry.
Yes.
Will you drop your mic just a little bit?
Yes, sorry.
It's super loud above us. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Better. You aren't super loud. The rain is super loud. So yeah, thank you.
So we provided support on some construction projects, and together these projects will bring over 200 units to the market. 107 of them are income restricted. And we are grateful for your investments that you provided to our housing team to further efforts on housing affordability. Moving to more of the modernization approach, we adopted multiple city codes, so electrical, building, and demolition. Essentially on the electrical side, that helped bring us further into allowing for electric cars, changing the outlets. And when you look at the demolition code, it basically allowed us to find ways that are more sustainable in construction and land waste. We started the zoning code rewrite, and there were two major deliverables in FY21. The first was the Diagnostic Solutions Report. It identified how the city of Boise was doing in the eyes of our community, in the eyes of our consultant. And the first module of the zoning code was released on April 22nd, which creates a framework for our new code. These two documents mark the beginning of the city's journey to modernize the zoning code. Moving to mobility and connectivity, we adopted the Northwest Neighborhood Plan, the West Downtown Neighborhood Plan, and soon the North End Neighborhood Plan. This creates an opportunity for the city and the neighborhoods to partner together. We also started the Pathways Master Plan, which builds on the legacy of the Greenbelt and identifies a network of off-street pathways and biking and walking across the city. In addition, we were just awarded a $1.2 million grant, Garden Street Pathway from Kaja Park to Albion, which increases that mobility and the connection as well. Responsiveness is something that we've been focusing on. You heard before that the city implemented a new permit system, Acela, and in the IBC a few weeks ago, you increased our ability to find further enhancements based on the resident experience. And so we will be looking to that in FY22 as well. One of the things we did was update the public hearing procedure, which increased transparency into the public hearing process and a better opportunity for public engagement. And then again, super grateful for the resources you provided in the IBC 2 weeks ago. This gives us an additional 6.5 FTE to maintain those service levels. You saw in the memo that our permit, which is really the first inspout to the city from our residents, increased 184% in 1 year. So thank you for investing in PDS. As we look to FY22, we are not going to stop. We will continue hitting the pavement, focusing on housing affordability, modernization, the mobility and connectivity. In the housing affordability arena, it's really focusing on the acceleration of the support facility relocations and permanent supportive housing. When we look into modernization, with affordable housing, being able to administer it and report off of it will help us migrate with some software. And then really looking at the Boise Pathway Plan, which is a multi-year project, and the Liberty Park Board Neighborhood Plan development. So again, want to thank you for the resources and the investments that you've made in planning and development services. We look forward to FY22 and getting closer to our 26.2 miles. I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Probably not a question for Kelsey to answer right now, but there were so many things in the housing affordability piece that I am like not familiar with at all. So it might be good to have a work session on some of that stuff, like the neighbor works with the home funds and some of the, I can't remember if it was the CDBG funds for, oh gosh, I can't remember. There were a lot of things in there, like a lot of.
Are you talking about the
lot of-
CDBG money that was granted out?
I don't think so. And can you go back a couple of slides?
Yes.
So I can say exactly what I mean. Sorry, it's just a lot of stuff. Oh, the home program funds on Autumn Gold, Maple Grove, Quarry Lane. Some of those, like, I have no idea what that even means. So I think it would be great to either memo us or do a little work session on what some of our initiatives are in that area. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I see some other PDS folks in the back, and I want to say thanks to you and the whole team, and please pass this on to the rest of the folks for the hard work you've given us this year. It's been a tough year. It's been a lot of work. There's been, more than anyone expected, and I've really appreciated the work that the team has done for us. So my question is twofold. First one, like Councilmember Woodings, I think we will need a follow-up work session on housing. I recently saw a presentation that I think we can share with City Council soon on the need for supportive housing. That might be part of it. And then a conversation about how we're going to go forward on supportive housing. And then question for you with the kind of growth we're seeing and the continued pressure to build more housing because we just frankly don't have enough, coupled with action of the legislature to limit our ability to serve new housing. Wonder if we could also consider talking about maybe formalizing the way that we've been looking at new annexations in a fiscal impact analysis kind of way, and we might even bring that to some other projects. So again, another work session item that I just like to, note here and talk about later more. But I think given the pressure that we're going to be under in the next year, it might be a way forward to really understand when it makes sense, when it doesn't.
Great. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
like Council President, thank you to, you and the entire staff. I would maybe argue that it's been a sprint the entire year for a year long, more than a marathon. A couple of weeks ago, our police department kind of came forward and gave us some predictions of what they thought that they may need for staffing over a long period of time, which I thought was super helpful, just to be able for us to create that mental picture. And so I'm wondering if maybe part of that future discussion is an exploration of what future staffing needs may be for PDS. And a couple of the reasons why I asked that question is with our zoning code rewrite that we have coming forward, I'm wondering if that is going to create more opportunity for things to be done at an administrative level. And if that will increase staffing, and with the housing shortage that we have available, if there is more staffing needed long-term to address some of those issues. I don't know the answers to any of those questions, and I don't know if you do right now or not, but I think it might be a discussion worth having in the future.
That's great. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelsey. I don't know what it looks like with these initiatives where there might be gaps. But I know just from personal experience, 10 years ago, when I was one of those people who was in a bad way, and I wasn't poor enough to qualify for services, but I still needed help. And I'm just wondering if with these initiatives that we have for affordable housing, can we identify those income gaps that might not be addressed with the initiatives we have now just so that we can highlight them and see if there's something we can do to make sure that they also receive those services. Because at the end of the day, it kills me when I look at Zillow and I see what my tall, skinny house is valued at now, and that for the want of $5,000, I'm not still in that house. So I'm hoping that that experience was for naught, so that I can be here today and say, let's make sure that doesn't happen this time. Thank you and the rest of PDS for all your efforts.
Thank you.
All right, Kelsey, thank you very much. Next up, welcome Steve with Public Works.
Madam Mayor, council members, good afternoon. I have the somewhat enviable task of wrapping up the general fund portion of our presentation, but then we'll get into the enterprise funds here in a second. So for the public works side of the house, for the general fund, this past year has really been focused in on climate action. You'll be seeing, I think on June 8th, the draft of the climate action roadmap. And then the hope is that we can get that finalized and then be able to roll into some of those improvements in the FY22. The Clean City Index was a recommendation that came out of the Clean City Transitions Report, and it was focused on health equity and environmental justice and getting a better sense of geographically within the city where those issues exist. So we'll be coming back to Mayor and Council. That's a draft that we just talked with the Mayor's office about, and then we'll be coming to you with a final version for you to consider moving forward. Happy to announce we have 8 new all-electric vehicles being added to the fleet. That was ordered back in April, and thanks to DFA and Fleet for helping us with that. And then this year, very proud to announce that we'll be rolling out 10 new all-electric trash trucks. They'll be arriving this fall, and at least for the near term, the city of Boise will have the largest fleet in the country at 10 trucks. Thanks to DFA, to others who are working through the different integration pieces of it. Idaho Power has been a great partner in trying to figure out all of the charging needs that come with an all-electric trash truck, and it's been a great partnership amongst various folks. So climate action is one thing, and we've been able to wrap up the climate action roadmap, and the intent of the roadmap was to start to operationalize climate action in city activities, but then start to pivot to the community. And so how are we starting to operationalize that within the city? Within our facilities management program, we've developed long-term building facility strategies. So looking at things like electrification of buildings, looking at things like, as we move to the hybrid work policy, what kind of setup could help support a hybrid work policy that would then allow us to reduce commute and therefore carbon emissions for city employees. That same group finished an analysis of 10 city buildings that looked at what it would take to become all electric. So many of our buildings have a portion that are natural gas and that have carbon emissions. You all know that we've committed to 100% clean electricity for city operations. We didn't do that just because we felt it was a nice thing to do. We wanted to transition to that clean energy. And so if we can be 100% electric at all of our buildings, then we can leverage that commitment on the 100% electricity, clean electricity. And then actually putting that into action, the police micro district, which opened this year, that was our first look at electrifying. And so we did an analysis. It was about a 16-year payback period to go all electric versus staying with natural gas. So that's a smart decision for us. That asset will be on our books for, who knows, 40, 50 years, and we'll be ahead over the life of the project. And then thank you. Last year, you all expedited funding for the LED street conversions. We were going to wrap that up this year in August. I think our budget was around 1.3 million. I think we're going to come in at about 900,000. So we'll be under budget, and that'll complete our LED street light conversions. That's a really cool story and ahead of schedule, about 5 years ahead of schedule. So thank you. And then looking forward to 22 climate action investments, we're going to build upon our energy and water efficiency for vulnerable communities. We have 2 ideas that we're moving forward this year. You gave us funding this year for that. We want to extend that program moving forward. So the 2 areas of focus will likely be weatherization programs for low-income vulnerable communities. And then also we're going to be putting it into the HCD's housing stock to make sure that those houses, single-family homes, are more efficient both for power and for water use. We're going to continue looking at our carbon neutral city operations and reinvesting into those building conversions and getting more of our fleet converted to all electric. And then probably most exciting for me is that last bullet is the green tariff renewable electricity procurement with Idaho Power. So we've been negotiating with Idaho Power on a concept called a green tariff. And the intent there is that we will build a large scale renewable facility in Boise. And in exchange, we will pay a very small premium on that power, which is very largely offset by the cost of carbon. So in effect, we'll be ahead. And what's more important is that'll allow city operations, once we get that negotiated, we will with a very straight face say, we are 100% clean electricity, likely within the next couple of years, which is ahead of schedule. And staff has been doing an amazing job negotiating with Idaho Power. So really excited about that. With that, I'll stand for questions on the general fund portion for Public Works.
Madam Mayor. Steve, quick question. I understand why we're looking at all electric on our buildings, but especially in the downtown, of course, we have our geothermal system. I assume that it's going to play a role in our downtown buildings?
Madam Mayor, Council President, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
So the geothermal system we'll get into here in a second in the enterprise fund. We'll be back in front of council, hopefully this year, maybe this fall, with an update on a geothermal strategic plan. It is a huge part of our Boise's energy future, and we want to make sure that we're expanding that system, including city buildings where there's an opportunity to connect. So absolutely, geothermal will be a key part.
And then follow up, if I may, it seems like a government organization would be well placed to also investigate the more traditional geothermal kinds of heating systems that aren't dependent on hot water, but are dependent on the mean temperature underground. And I wonder if we're at all exploring that. There are places, especially in this valley, where because of decomposing granite, we've got actually a higher mean temperature underground than in many other places. And it seems like we're just at least well placed to explore whether that's a viable option, even if we don't end up doing it.
Madam Mayor, Council President, thanks for the question. So as part of the geothermal strategic plan, one of the areas of emphasis is innovation. And so one of the ideas that we have is how do we create a year-round use for geothermal? And could that entail some type of ground source heat pumps integrated into the geothermal system so that it could be a cooling system in the summer? So stay tuned on that. We're going to be reaching out to Idaho National Lab and Boise State to partner on some of the innovation. Don't have a good answer for you yet, but I think that's something we'll be working on in the coming year or so.
And just one last note, if I could real quick, the Treasure Valley Canopy Network, which is a partner on the City of Trees Challenge, is also working on a green tech program and recently had a good breakthrough on that.
Great.
So
Great.
Stay tuned. I think there will be ways that will benefit the whole valley.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm very excited about the green tariff project, especially. I think that has a ton of potential. My question is in regards to LED streetlights. Have we had any complaints from citizens on the brightness of those streetlights? Because the one that's outside of my house is like daylight color and it shines in my kids' bedroom windows, and I've had to put up blackout curtains on their windows. Am I the only one who's had that experience?
Madam Mayor, Council member, you are not alone. Yeah, we have gotten some complaints, and we've worked with residents on different ways to shield the light coming off of the LED streetlights. Frankly, as we work our way up into the foothills, that's the next phase coming this summer. We'll probably get a little more attention. And I've already talked with staff on how do we start to mitigate that. They're already ahead of it and thinking through kind of how do we create limit light pollution, making sure that that brightness is not impacting residents. So you are not alone. We've had several calls and working through it with citizens. So yes, that's an issue that we're aware of. Yep.
Madam Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. I very much want to thank you for making such a concerted effort to ensure that as you do the work of Public Works, that you take into consideration the needs of our community members who don't have the resources. And oftentimes they don't have the voice to advocate for themselves, or there are people who are very intimidated by the city of Boise and the thought of even making a phone call even to talk about what Councilmember Wooding said, to talk about the lights, they might not do that. And so I just want to thank you for taking into consideration the needs of our community members who may be hesitant to bring up these issues. And also to the fact that you have embraced diversity, inclusion, and equity in this work. I think there is a movement in our country and in our state and in this local community to make a greater outreach effort to include communities of color, to include marginalized communities in the work of conservation. And so I am very proud to be associated with the city of Boise, knowing that someone like you is taking all of those needs into consideration. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Steve, just real quick, I appreciate you bringing up the component of how people working from home might cut down on our carbon footprint as far as people coming in. And I think there's probably another component there when we're looking at our carbon neutral city operations of ways that we could be kind of getting up to date and better encouraging people to walk and ride and take public transportation for many of those trips. And I think our city's done a really good job. And there's probably some areas when we're looking at, new buildings and infrastructure and updating some existing buildings, to make that a little bit easier and lower that carbon footprint as well. Thank
Will
you.
do. Thank you.
All right, it looks like you can go into the enterprise fund.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor. Okay, jumping into the enterprise funds. So I'll start with water renewal with the caveat that we're going to have a much broader presentation on water renewal services, given the amount of investment that's needed and the kind of innovative approaches that we're considering moving forward later in June. So I'll just really high level highlights here. Within 2020, we finished the utility plan, which was a huge effort that sets the course for 20 years for our water renewal services. And you all are well aware of that and approved that back in October. This year, we've been working on the long-term financial strategy, which we've been providing updates to council on. That's what we'll be giving kind of that final approach here in June to get your blessing moving forward on our financial approach. In 2021, we've been under construction out at Lander Street for a couple of years now. And phase one is the largest project that we've undertaken. It's a $50.5 million project. We are on schedule and currently under budget. And we're hoping to keep it that way, wrapping up next fall, or I guess this fall, 2022 rather, sorry, fall of 2022, so that'd be next fall. And then we had some large line replacements that we've been working on as well. That kind of goes into that classification of we have some old lines that need replacement. And so you're going to see more and more of that. We're going to start to increase our investment in line replacement in the coming years. And then again, the FY22 budget, more details coming in the separate presentation. Moving on to our solid waste program. In 2021, I mentioned the all-electric trash trucks. We did see a rate change at the county. The county shifted from a volume rate base to a weight rate base. And that resulted in an increase in cost for not only our trash going to landfill, but also the trash coming from our transfer stations. And so those, in conjunction with some other cost increases like the compost facility expansion, et cetera, are resulting in the needs for a rate increase. We are going to request a rate increase of 4.5%. That's going to propose for all users. So that's commercial and residential. And so you might be wondering, what does that mean from a residential standpoint? That's about 93 cents a month rate increase per residential customer. So that's something we will be putting in the rate schedule and are requesting approval for that rate increase. And then on geothermal side, we have been very proactively reinvesting in the geothermal system. You're probably seeing a lot of repairs going on along the downtown corridor. The one right now, 10th and Bannock, we're in repairing an old line, replacing an old line. And then we also have a lot of proactive repairs that we're doing. The winter of 2017, 2018 was a long one for us. We had many line breaks, and based on the kind of postmortem, we found that we had a valve that was closing in the injection well that was causing a water hammer, like a pressure spike throughout the system. And so that was leading to a lot of the line breaks. We've fixed that, adjusted the valve, and now we're trying to be more proactive, getting ahead of line breaks so we're not scrambling around going from break to break, but rather being proactive on the repairs at our own schedule and coordinating with folks. And then I mentioned the geothermal strategic plan that we'll be completing this year. We're excited about that one. The geothermal system it's a gem downtown, and it's a unique offering that we have that most cities would really be would kill for, are very envious of. We don't have any rate changes proposed. We want to talk to you about the geothermal strategy moving forward. I think we want to start talking about carbon savings within the geothermal fund moving forward. I think that's an advantage that we'll have, and how do we capture that? Those kind of conversations we want to have with you in the summer and fall. So, and with that, I'll stand for questions on the enterprise funds.
Thank you, Steve, very
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
And last but not least is the airport with Rebecca.
Good morning, afternoon. Time flies when you're having fun. All right. Well, thank you all for the opportunity to be here and present to you. I want to start off by talking about the current year and the last year, obviously COVID, but we've really been focusing on number one, keeping our employees and passengers safe over this last year, but also positioning the airport for what we know is coming in the future. And some of the things that we've been working on are our service animal relief area and our terminal lactation room. Those are both requirements for the airport as we grow. If we reach a medium hub status, those would both be required by federal regulation, but they're quite frankly just good practice and a way to accommodate our passengers' needs. We have been diligently planning for increased parking capacity at the airport, including design of our public parking garage. Because of the rebound in traffic that we're seeing, we do expect that we'll issue bids for that this summer and issue bonds for that. As a refresher, airport revenue bonds do not require general voter approval because they are backed by airport revenues. We're also working on a rental car garage design because we'll have to relocate rental cars to be able to expand our concourse. We are at the very beginning phases of that. Some of the other important things that we've done to position ourselves for future development is make sure that our revenues are keeping up. One of the ways that we did that was entering into a rideshare agreement with Uber and Lyft, where they actually pay us for utilizing airport facilities. We also implemented a passenger facility charge fee, which gets charged to each airline ticket and then remitted to the airport for capital development, and a CFC, a customer facility charge, which is the very similar thing, but on rental car contracts. And I would be remiss if I did not mention 7 new destinations to the Boise region during COVID. I'm not going to get into this slide in too much detail, but I wanted to put it up just to show that while we're talking about lots of things that are public facing and passenger facing, there's an equal amount of work and perhaps even more work that's happening on the airfield side to make sure that we continue to be compliant with federal aviation regulations because they've changed some of the design standards. And so we are upgrading a number of our infrastructure features on the airfield itself, including looking at a future Concourse A apron design that we're moving up because we do not have enough parking spaces in our current configuration. I think everyone has seen this before. This is just a recap of some of the improvements that we anticipate seeing at the airport over approximately the next 5 years. And as we move towards those, these are a couple of the projects that we've talked about already: the parking garage design and construction, the rental car design and construction, Southeast cargo apron and taxi lane, Concourse A apron design, and then widening taxiway Sierra. Those are all capital projects. They'll be paid for with a variety of funds. Grant funding will be about $8 million. That passenger facility charge funding, about $23 million. That will go primarily to the Concourse A and a number of airfield improvements. The customer facility charge funding will go specifically for the rental car garage, and then operating cash flow and bonds will be used to pay for the other improvements. And I think the theme of all of our presentations today has been growth. And as all of you probably remember, in 2019, we were talking about how we had experienced 50% growth in the 6 years leading up to 2020, up to 2019. And we thought that 2020 was going to be a record year. And well, it was, but not in the way that we had envisioned. So looking forward to 2021, not only are we rebounding to our pre-2020, our 2019 levels, we are expecting to see, based on information that is available today and flights that are currently available for reservation, we're expecting to see up to a third increase in capacity in our market. And so we are figuring out what can we do today to accommodate this additional demand? What are the things that we can do in the next year? And then what's the 5-year? And then beyond that, how do we make sure we're ready? And so with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have related to airport.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
It's a very easy question. What's the difference between a departure and a flight? Or departures people and flights?
They're pretty much, I would say, the same. Departures would be an aircraft leaving. A flight could be either arriving or departing. And sometimes we talk about flights and sometimes we talk about seats, because sometimes the number of flights stay the same, but an airline might put in a larger aircraft, which would mean a greater number of seats. So if we went from a 90-seat aircraft to a 120-seat aircraft, the number of flights would stay the same. The number of seats would change. This is flights, but I would tell you that the number of seats is probably very similar increase, which is really how we measure what we think is going to happen with passengers.
Madam Mayor, just real quick, wanted to say job well done on those nonstop connections, especially that New York one. It's going to be really interesting to see from an economic development level what sort of impact that creates. So thanks for making big stuff happen during a tough time.
I think that's probably the flight that I'm most excited about. And I'm sure I'm not supposed to say that I have favorites, but I think from a regional perspective, from the Valley perspective, opening up that New York market and that East Coast market with a nonstop is a game changer for our industry. And we have lots of great service, and I'm excited about all of the service that's been added. But I do think that New York one has the potential to really shift the dynamics in our market.
Madam Mayor. Good to see you, Rebecca, and looking forward to our first in-person airport commercial meeting again. My question is, with all of the new additional flights, we still don't have a direct to Reno yet again. I just wondered if there's any progress on that. I still get questions about it.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of those that we haven't had quite the right fit. We've had service to Reno, and then it's been canceled, and then it's been reinstated, and then they've changed the schedule, and then it's canceled again. And I think that's one where they really have to work on the timing to make it be successful, and you have to have the right aircraft at the right time. And I don't think that we've ever had that right mix. It is one of our larger unserved nonstop destinations. That said, it's not a huge, there's a community of interest, but not with the level of demand that we see in some of the other markets. So I think hopefully Alaska, which has made Boise a focus city and has added significant service in our market, I'm hopeful that they'll be willing to try it again. They've tried it in the past and haven't been able to make it work. But as they add service through Boise to other places, I am hoping that we'll see it come to fruition again.
Madam Mayor. Thanks, Rebecca. That was actually me. I was the constituent complaining about not being able to get nonstop service to Reno. I have a question about the rideshare stuff. So a couple of years ago, we had been talking about a waiting facility for ride sharing. Did that situation ever get resolved? Is that something we need to look at again? What's going on with that?
Thank you for bringing that up. The question was about ride sharing and staging areas. And that was actually one of the reasons that we were able to enter into an operating agreement. And we've talked about TNC's ride sharing here before, but the legislature had prohibited us from regulating TNC's, transportation network companies, and dictating where they could go and where they could stage. But we actually entered into an operating agreement with them where they willingly pay us for space and for the use of the facility. And one of the areas that we've created for them is a staging area. And it's over behind and adjacent to the roadway inn on the backside over there. And so we've created about 40 spaces, a parking lot where they can stage in that area and then pick passengers up.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca, for all your hard work. I think we do see the light at the end of the tunnel here, and airport in particular was one of the hardest hits. And so I think you did a great job navigating. And in particular, thank you for the additional nonstop flights to Vegas coming up in June. As a Raider fan, that's going to come in very handy.
You're welcome. I did that special just for you
I thought
and all
so.
Raiders fans.
Thank you. I thought so.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. So we are ahead of schedule, which is lovely. Courtney will be back up with just to do some follow-up, see if there are other questions that ought to be tracked down that people have that we can follow up with later.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I just want to go over the next steps. So our target date to release the budget document is on 6/18. The budget workshop is on 6/22, and the public hearing associated with the budget is currently scheduled for 7/13. And with that, I'll stand for any questions. We also are ahead of time. So if you'd like to bring anybody back up, I'm sure they'd like to come.
Well, this has been a full and interesting day. Really appreciate the conversation. I know that Christine collected some other questions. There might be follow-up that we'll come back to during the budget workshop with. But I just want to thank everybody. First off, staff, thank you for painting the picture of all that you've done in the last year to provide service to the city. It's that value that our residents truly appreciate. And then making clear what it is we're focused on as we move beyond and forward from COVID, with all of the growth that we're experiencing and the opportunity that will and has arisen from the challenges we've all experienced together. And to council for asking lots of questions, sharing many thoughts, and being a partner in this. When we come with the budget book and then our workshop, we'll be drilling into even more detail. Really look forward to that as well for the public to see the detail of the programs that we're proposing and the services that the city can provide with this next year's budget. And with that, I think if there's nothing further, we can go ahead and adjourn.
Madam Mayor, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion a second. Clerk, will you call the roll?
Thompson. Woodings.
Yes.
Bajent.
Yes.
Clegg.
Yes.
Halliburton.
Yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you, everybody.